lot of devices. Hi, my name is Casey Yoder. My book was The Silence Between Us by Alison Gervais. This is my script. This is my presentation. Here we go. So, The Silence Between Us is a story of a girl named Maya who is deaf. And Maya moves to a new hearing school, and she has to learn how to embrace her deaf culture while also letting in the hearing world around her. So that being said, welcome to The Silence Between Us, a virtual experience. So this is our showroom. So first we're going to go into the curator's office. The curator is me. I put together this presentation, and a lot of the artwork is actually mine. I specify which are not. If I don't say another author or creator, I created the artwork. The first room I want to go into, I want to start by taking you through a journey of Maya's discovery of herself throughout the book. So Maya started as a girl who is deaf, thrown into a hearing world. She describes herself as black and white, surrounded by a world of color. So in this piece, I chose to do Maya's silhouette in black and white, and her classmates' silhouettes in color, moving in the opposite directions. And her classmates are a little blurred. You can't really make out their definitions as well as you can of Maya's, because Maya was not a part of their world. They weren't a part of Maya's. She didn't feel like she belonged in their world, and she didn't feel like they would ever understand hers. So the next piece and the next part of Maya's journey. So we see Maya's silhouette again, but Maya's silhouette is not clearly defined. It's starting to blur a little. She doesn't see herself as just part of the deaf community. She's starting to see herself as a member of her hearing school as well. And the colors around her are starting to drip, and they're coming more into focus, because Maya is not just a deaf girl in a hearing school. She's starting to realize that her deafness doesn't define her, and it shouldn't isolate her. The third piece of the installment is really a pivotal point for Maya in her journey. So Maya receives a book from Bo, who is her love interest, on her birthday. And Bo gives her Jane Eyre with the quote, "I am a bird, no net ensnares me," underlined. And he says, "I think you'll really be able to connect with the main character, and I noticed you don't have a lot of literature." And Maya really starts to feel appreciated and seen by Bo and by the hearing community she's in. I think it was a really pivotal moment for her story, because Maya's not just black and white, and now she's starting to emerge from this cage she thought she needed to be in, where she was just part of a hearing community. And now she's not just part of a deaf community. She's part of a hearing community as well. So that's why Maya is the bird. She's flying away. She's starting to see. And she was defined by one thing, but now she's no longer black and white, but also bursting with color. The last installment for Maya's journey that I have is Maya's final piece. And Maya is now in full color. Maya's silhouette is still present, but layers of color are revealing themselves. By the end of the book, Maya no longer is just one thing that has defined her, but she's constantly having new layers come to the surface. To quote Maya, "A year and a half ago, I couldn't have felt more terrible about moving out here to Colorado. But it didn't turn out so bad in the end. I found Bo and Nina, and now Melissa was here. And it didn't matter who was deaf or who was hearing. We just were." For the next piece of my presentation, I want to talk a little bit about what I've learned about deaf culture, while also highlighting deaf artists and artivists, so people who use art to be activists. The first piece I chose is called Friends, and it's by Nancy Rourke. And it's actually the cover of my book. The piece is sign language for friends, and I think it really represents the relationships between individuals with disabilities and those around them. Individuals with disabilities like deafness don't need people to speak for them. They need fellow advocates and friends to support them and stand with them. My next piece is also by Nancy Rourke and is titled ASL Lives. ASL is a very difficult language to learn, but it's vital and necessary, just like any other language. Lip reading can be difficult and exhausting to do all the time, and hearing aids only aid in helping make wearers more aware of their surroundings. A lot of the deaf community are oral, but it is their decision to use their voices. ASL is their language, and it's beautiful and it's worthy of appreciation. To add to that, I want to pull a quote from the book. It is one thing to learn and use ASL, and something totally different to understand the people and the culture ASL belong to. My third piece is called You See Me, and it's by Ashley Hannon. I chose this piece to talk about cochlear implants because they're presented in the piece. I want to pull directly from the book because I feel that the book does the best job of explaining them. Cochlear implants were kind of like hearing aids in that they work to improve hearing, but the process of getting one involved an irreversible surgery and a lot of following speech therapy if you were born deaf and never developed oral skills. Maya also talks about in the book an experience of one of her friends who had the cochlear implants, and she says crackly, like the noise was being processed through a computer, so everything sounded electronic. She said it made her tired sometimes too, having to process all that extra noise she wasn't used to, and it made her head hurt occasionally. And the required speech therapy after the surgery was a pain in the butt. Maya also talks about in the book how cochlear implants are a great resource for some people, and they can be a great thing for some people, but they're not for everybody, and they weren't for her. And I think that's a really important piece to highlight as well. Just because one way is the best for someone doesn't mean it's the best for others. Everybody, including those with disabilities, have to figure out what works best for them and not worry about what others are doing that's best for those people. So my next installment was created by Jennifer Tanduk and is titled Still Grow Beautifully. In the story, Maya does a presentation on DPN, or Deaf President Now. I feel like it would be an injustice to Maya's story or to the book to not include it, so here's some information on it. Deaf President Now, or DPN, was a huge turning point for the deaf community back in the 1980s. DPN was a student-led protest at Gallaudet University, the first all-inclusive university in the United States for deaf and hard of hearing, where they protested the appointment of yet another hearing president who didn't even know sign language. It took days of protests and thousands of people marching on Capitol Hill to make the deaf students' demands heard. And Maya also talks about in the book, I'm going to pull a quote from her. To the rest of the world, I doubted DPN was significant enough to make a tiny blip in history, but there was so much more to it than that. It was a turning point in the disability rights movement and let the world see just how driven and capable deaf people are. It set the precedent for how future presidents of Gallaudet would be chosen and let students finally have their say. My last installment for the deaf culture portion speaks for itself. We don't need a hero, we need to be heard. Individuals with disabilities have voices, and most can speak for themselves. They don't need others to speak for them or believe that they are incapable of representing themselves. They just need advocates and friends and supporters. My last installment in my presentation is about two of Maya's friends who really helped her in the hearing culture and community. Maya's first hearing friend I want to mention was Bo. Bo didn't understand Maya at first, and he certainly didn't understand person-first language. He would speak through her interpreter, or he would speak really fast so she couldn't lip read. However, Bo was the first person in Maya's school who made an effort to learn ASL in order to communicate with Maya in a way she would be comfortable with. Bo saw Maya by the end of the book. He was an advocate and a supporter for her. He made an effort to not only just learn ASL to communicate with Maya, but also to learn about deaf culture. and why it was not only important but vital to Maya's life. Her next friend was Nina. Nina was a peer mentor for Maya, who treated her as a fellow student and a friend rather than a girl with hearing impairments. Nina talked directly to Maya rather than through Maya's interpreter and made an effort to include her in conversations and connect with her. Maya gained a great friend in Nina, and Nina played a big role in Maya connecting with her deaf culture and the hearing world around her. Nina was inclusive and saw Maya for who she was, not for her physical impairments. So that is my presentation. These are my references. So other than the credited artists, all work was created by me, and all the information was pulled from The Silence Between Us by Alison Gervais. And Alison Gervais, the author of the book, actually works in the deaf community, and that's where she got a lot of the material for her book. So that is why I chose to pull directly from the story and from what she talks about. And then my slides were created by Slidesmania, and the art images that I removed, so that is not necessary anymore. Just to give credit where credit is due. Thank you for listening. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and I hope you learned a little something because I know I sure did.